What if I told you that one of the most powerful men in the world did not lose his position because of an election defeat, a war, or a revolution, but because of a small nighttime break-in that spiraled into the biggest political scandal in modern American history, a scandal that forced the first-ever resignation of a United States president? His name was Richard Nixon, and the scandal is known as the Watergate scandal. It all begins in 1972 in Washington, D.C., inside a building called the Watergate Complex. At first glance, it looks like just another modern office and hotel complex. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic. But inside this building, history is quietly about to change. In the middle of a political climate already filled with tension, protests, and distrust in government, a group of men break into the headquarters of the Democratic National Committee. Their mission is not robbery. They are not stealing money or documents for financial gain. Instead, they are attempting to install listening devices to spy on political opponents of President Nixon as he runs for re-election. They move in quietly at night. Flashlights, tools, tape, lockpicks. Everything is done in secrecy. The goal is simple in theory, but dangerous in reality. Gain political advantage by secretly gathering information from the opposing party. But something goes wrong. Security catches them. The police are called. And just like that, what was supposed to be a silent operation becomes a public arrest. At first, it seems like a minor incident. Just another break-in. Just another crime report in Washington. The White House quickly distances itself. Officials insist there is no connection between the burglars and the president's re-election campaign. It looks like the story might end there. A group of criminals acted alone. Case closed. But it does not end there. Two journalists working at the Washington Post, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, begin to investigate. At first, their assignment seems ordinary. Report on a burglary tied to a political office. But as they begin to dig deeper, they notice something unusual. The men arrested are not ordinary burglars. Some of them have connections to intelligence agencies, political organizations, and people close to power. The journalists begin asking a simple question that slowly becomes more dangerous than anyone expected. Who is paying for this operation? The deeper they investigate, the more resistance they face. Officials refuse to talk. Sources go silent. Some information disappears. Others deny everything, but instead of stopping, the investigation becomes more intense. Every new lead opens another door. Every answer leads to more questions, and slowly, a pattern begins to emerge. This was not just a random break-in. This was organized, funded, directed, and possibly connected to people far higher than anyone initially believed. Inside the White House, tension begins to build. There is growing fear that the investigation might eventually reach the president's inner circle. Meetings become more secretive. Decisions become more defensive. Instead of full transparency, the focus shifts to damage control. The goal is no longer just to explain what happened. The goal becomes controlling what people find out. As pressure increases, efforts begin to contain the situation. Money is quietly moved to silence those involved. Witnesses are pressured to stay quiet. Stories are adjusted. The idea is simple: prevent the truth from spreading. But every attempt to hide the truth only creates more suspicion, because hiding something often makes it look more real than denying it. Meanwhile, the journalists continue their work. They receive guidance from an anonymous source known only as Deep Throat. This source meets secretly, shares warnings, and confirms that the investigation is moving in the right direction. One of the most famous pieces of advice given is simple but powerful: follow the money. That advice becomes the key that unlocks the entire scandal. As financial records are examined, patterns appear that connect payments back to people tied to the re-election campaign. What once looked like an isolated incident begins to form into a larger system of coordination and secrecy. The investigation is no longer just about who broke into an office. It is about who knew, who approved, and who tried to cover it up. As the pressure mounts, the situation escalates beyond journalism. Government investigators, legal authorities, and congressional committees begin to take interest. The story becomes national, then global. The public begins to realize that something far bigger than a simple burglary may have taken place at the highest levels of government. At the center of it all is President Richard Nixon. He continues to deny direct involvement. But the question of what he knew and when he knew it becomes the defining issue of the entire crisis. Because even if he did not personally order the break-in, evidence begins to suggest that members of his administration were involved in covering it up. And in politics, sometimes the cover-up is more damaging than the original act. As investigations continue, a major breakthrough occurs: secret recordings made inside the White House. Nixon had installed a system that recorded conversations in the Oval Office and other locations. These tapes, once private, now become central evidence in a national investigation. But Nixon refuses to release them, claiming executive privilege and privacy concerns. A legal battle begins, escalating all the way to the United States Supreme Court. The Supreme Court issues a historic ruling. Nixon must release the tapes. There is no exception, no political shield, no executive protection strong enough to override the demand for evidence. And when the tapes are finally reviewed, they reveal something devastating. Conversations that strongly suggest awareness of the cover-up. Discussions that imply efforts to manage, control, or limit the investigation. The evidence does not need interpretation. It speaks for itself. Once the tapes become public knowledge, political support for Nixon collapses rapidly. Members of Congress who once defended him begin to withdraw their support. The possibility of impeachment becomes very real. The nation is divided, but the momentum against him grows stronger every day. It becomes clear that he cannot survive the political consequences of what is unfolding. Behind closed doors, discussions begin about resignation, not as an admission of guilt in a court of law, but as a political necessity to avoid a full impeachment process. The pressure becomes overwhelming. Allies step away, trust disappears, and the presidency begins to unravel. On August 8, 1974, Richard Nixon announces his resignation. The next day, he leaves office. Just like that, the most powerful political position in the United States is surrendered, not because of an election defeat, but because of a scandal that started with a break-in and expanded into a constitutional crisis. The nation is left stunned. For the first time in history, a U.S. president has resigned. The event reshapes American politics forever. It changes how the public views leadership, how the media investigates power, and how institutions respond to corruption. But beyond politics, the Watergate scandal leaves a deeper lesson. Power without accountability eventually collapses. Secrets may delay truth, but they cannot destroy it. Systems built on control and silence eventually crack under pressure. And in the end, truth does not depend on position or authority. It depends on persistence. The burglary at the Watergate complex was small, almost insignificant at first glance, but the attempt to hide it transformed it into something far larger than anyone expected. It became a symbol of political accountability, investigative journalism, and the limits of executive power. And even today, decades later, the Watergate scandal remains a reminder that no matter how high someone rises, no position is beyond scrutiny, no office is beyond investigation, and no leader is beyond the reach of truth. Because in the end, it was not the break-in that brought down a president, it was the silence that followed it.